Aloha, spooky nerds, and welcome to Talking Strange, a paranormal pop culture show with the Den of Geek Network. I am your host, journalist, author, researcher of weird things, all weird things, Aaron Sagers. I'm also appear on the Travel Channel and Discovery Plus show, Paranormal Caught on Camera. And I'm the host of the 28 Days Haunted series on Netflix, which premieres October 21st. So I don't need to tell you that it is spooky season, whether you know it is spooky season or Ghosttober or Halloween or however you refer to it. We are in the throes of all things spooky. But for some of you, it's not a month. It's not 2 months. It's a way of life. And I think that that's something we're going to be talking about as well. But today we are talking about This is Halloween. This is Halloween. We're talking about Halloween, its origins, its importance, the legends, the evolution, all of it. And I want to hear from you guys. I want to get your questions, line them up, throw them in the chat. And we are going to address those. But first off, I want to bring in a couple guests, people that I have the privilege to call friends and colleagues, and I'm so happy that they could be joining me. First up, she is a sociologist and author. She earned her PhD in 2009 from the University of Pittsburgh. She currently conducts research on fear, specifically how and why people engage in scary experiences. She likes haunted attractions and horror movies. She's enjoys working as a consultant for attractions. She's also the author of Scream: Chilling Adventures in the Science of Fear, which was named as a must-read by the Washington Post. And also she worked on the book Ouch: Why Pain Hurts and Why It Doesn't Have to. Her name is Dr. Margee Kerr. Margee, thank you for joining me today. So good to see you.
Thank you for having me. So good to see you too.
It's been far too long,
It has.
and I'm excited to chat with you. And let me bring in another guest who is a folklorist, associate professor at Utah State University, where she serves as the chair of the folklore program. Her research and interests include legends, beliefs, fandom, and digital culture. She is the author of the textbook Folklore Rules and the co-editor of Slender Man is Coming: Creepypasta and Contemporary Legends on the Internet, and Legend Tripping, a contemporary legend casebook. She also appears on Paranormal Caught on Camera, and she's the really smart commentator, Dr. Lynne S. McNeill. Hi, Lynn. How are you?
Hello.
And
Good. How are
I'm going to
you?
move myself to the bottom here, so you two awesome people are right up top. How is your spooky season treating you so far? Lynn, you mentioned your spooky season involves a lot of, per usual, academics.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's made extra spooky by lots of promotion and tenure committee meetings, which is, I can't even make it sound that exciting. It's more boring and exhausting than spooky, but I get to decorate my house. The horror, exactly. The horror of unending tedium. I've been decorating my house, and I went with a dead baby theme this year. So, I have that as the trade-off.
Right. Okay. I mean, I want to see pictures. I think you need to post those on social media. But all right, so Lynn's coming in hot with academics and dead baby motif for her.
The usual pairing,
Yes. No pressure, Margee.
What
do you got going on?
Mine is off to a really good start too. I just got approval from the University of Pittsburgh to collect more data at a new site this season. So I'm very excited to get back out there and start talking to people and seeing what they're feeling this year. And this year, the big exciting thing is that we can collect follow-up data. So now we can follow up with people in a few days and a few weeks to see how the experience may be staying with them and impacting their mood. And so I'm very excited. I just got that news yesterday, so I'm still kind of riding a high from that. Yeah, it's a big deal. Getting approval to do something is always a big deal and a big win. So
Well, yeah, and congratulations. Just to kind of provide some context for some folks that may not
Yeah.
have heard from you before, talk a little bit about the data you previously collected, which also was represented, you discussed in the book Scream as well.
Yeah, so my colleague Greg Siegel and I have been collecting data from people who want to do scary activities. For example, go to a haunted house or a paranormal investigation, anything that involves the kind of, threat and fear and intense emotions. And we started collecting data in 2014. And the protocol that we have with the University of Pittsburgh, which is required to, collect data ethically to make sure that everything is running as it should, that we're protecting everyone's privacy. We have it written so that we can continue to add different sites and different events to the protocol. And it's a big deal to be able to get the approval to do follow-up data now with participants, because it means that we're collecting some personal identifiers. And previously, we were only able to really get data in the moment, which is great because we do want to know what people are experiencing in the moment before and after they do something scary. But we really have, for a while, wanted to know how the experience continues to impact them along the way. So we ask questions like, what are your expectations? How are you feeling? A lot of opportunities to ask them how they're feeling, and then what they expect to get out of the experience, and what their, just their motivations for being there that night might be. So that's a little bit. Yeah, sorry, I just jumped right in there. I am just excited to be able to get follow-up data.
Oh,
So
it's excellent. And that's exactly what I was asking about. Well, I will
yeah.
circle back to some of the science and the social science, but I want to go back in time, maybe 2,500 years, maybe as far back as 5,000 years. I don't know. Lynn, give us a little bit of a rundown of the origins of what we came to know as Halloween.
Yeah, this is a great story because it's one where we actually do have some information from sort of the murky mists of ancient times, where a lot of the times we're left with conjecture or speculation or maybe even some solid theatrical invention. We have some pretty good details on where Halloween came to us from, and it came to us from ancient Ireland and the festival known as Samhain, which was a celebration of the harvest, of death, of dying. Um, there's some speculation now about what exact time of the year that was for the ancient Celtic people. It was believed for a really long time that this was the Celtic New Year celebration, that we were seeing the start of the year. Julius Caesar, when he wrote about their culture, said they begin time, whether it's days, weeks, or years, with the darkness. So days begin at night instead of in the morning. And this was sort of interpreted to mean the year would begin at the dark time of the year. So starting now, where days are getting shorter, we're moving into winter and through autumn. The name at the time for the months we're in, the ancient Celts were really good at calendars, which is fun. They called this month seed fall, which I just think is fantastic, and we should bring it back. But they had this festival called Samhain, whether it was the new year or not, that was this acknowledgement of the souls that had departed in the previous year. And it was this opportunity for people to think about, engage with, commemorate, maybe even interact with those spirits. And when Christianity came to Ireland, as it came to so many places, there was this effort to sort of like stick it all together. The folks doing a lot of the converting at that time were, they knew what they were doing. They were good with PR, and they rarely said, let's eliminate this festival or this belief that you already have. What they said was, let's incorporate it. So we actually see a lot of pre-Christian traditions and beliefs and even deities being incorporated into that early Christianity in the form of saints, in the form of different local rituals, holy places, wells and springs and things like that. And so we get this celebration in the Catholic Church known as All Saints' Day. All Souls Day was added as the day after shortly, because All Saints Day didn't quite cut it. Samhain had been about all of us, everyday people, and the people who are lost. And All Saints Day is sort of about, the venerated people among religious belief. And All Souls Day was meant to sort of round that out. And of course, the day before All Saints Day is All Hallows Eve, the night before, which is where we get the word Halloween that we use. And it's interesting too, because we have some historical records that show that Samhain itself was a 3-day celebration. And we sort of have that as well now, the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd, whether you celebrate that as Dia de Muertos or whether you celebrate it as Halloween or All Saints Day or All Souls Day, it's in keeping with this like unbelievably epic ancient tradition.
Well, and the what it came to be known today, I mean, there's an evolution and patchwork of a lot of different, it seems like, cultures and beliefs. And
Yeah.
the Romans, like Lemuria, right, and Beltane, those were kind of heaped onto this what would become Halloween as well, right?
Yeah, we get all of these motifs from like different world religions, different world celebrations. We get the house visit, for example, what we call trick-or-treating, which comes to us, that used to happen at Christmas time in a lot of places when mummers would go around town dressed in, different costumes and go begging for drink or for food at different houses and play music or put on little shows for people in return for getting money or treats or something like that. We have the carving of pumpkins. We have the building of altars. That's something that happens traditionally for a lot of different cultures and religions. We also, in some places, have Halloween becoming a sort of bonfire night where what you do is you go out and all the deadfall of the autumnal season, you burn in a big heap and people stay up late. And it's a time of sort of license and wildness and behavior that maybe isn't quite so okay during the normal part of the year. You have the freedom to do it a little bit. So we see in that almost a Mardi Gras, like a carnivalesque turn of things. And we see that now in contemporary Halloween, where vandalism is certainly not considered okay, but it's a tiny bit more overlooked on Halloween or understood on Halloween than it might at other times. So it becomes this day of license almost.
Yeah. And I was speaking of the bonfire. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was also the element of the need fire, the gathering together these sacred trees, limbs from trees, adding it to this community fire, and then people taking those embers back to their own hearths to restart the flames that they had put out, to kind of be a community bonding experience.
Yeah. We see a lot of that at this time of year. And I think it's one of those things that makes a real sort of innate or intrinsic sense when we think of where we're headed at this time of year, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, that we're headed into times where it's cold. We might be isolated. We might not be able to travel. We don't have abundant food growing. We're going to be relying on stores and storage, and we're going to be relying on each other.
Yeah.
And the darkening of the world really is one of those things that, yes, it's sort of a reality of the nature of, physics and the universe, but human beings have always wanted to help the light return. So in the dark seasons, we have all these festivals of light, whether we're, at the, the end of our year, lighting Christmas trees or menorahs or Yule logs or whatever. We see this real emphasis on kindling, on igniting, on lights that recognize the ending of one thing is intrinsically tied to the beginning of the next.
Margee, from your perspective, with these early traditions, Samhain, there would be, people would wear masks. The veil was at its thinnest, and people would wear masks to essentially confuse any potential spirits, especially the bad ones, so they could pass unnoticed. But of course, there's the element of, literally masquerading, obscuring your face. What kind of purpose does that serve from a sociological standpoint, both the acknowledging this thin veil, this mortality, as well as what kind of license are we given when we are wearing masks?
Yeah, I think you just said it. It's that license to kind of put on a different personality, a different, even kind of worldview, to be somebody else for a night, and to interact with people without all of the assumptions and expectations and all of the preconceived notions that people in your life might have. Now you have an opportunity to just kind of try and start over and do something different. So I think that need has been around for a very long time, that however it shows up, whether it's wearing masks for spiritual rituals or for Halloween, it's that opportunity to really kind of step into a different person's shoes and be someone different for a while. And it opens our minds, I think, in an important way to just thinking about different points of view in life. So we can really think about different people's perspectives and just be more creative, just kind of open the doors that may have been shut just by the everyday kind of routine and interactions.
What's your perspective on the need for pranking? Because, or if there is a need for pranking, because we also saw it, I think, in England during Guy Fawkes Day, there would be sort of this trick or treat element, and that took place in November. Trick or treat element as well as a little bit of pranking, and then when it makes the leap over to the colonies, there was different perspectives on Halloween, but eventually we did see these Devil's Night, these Hell Nights, these prank nights where people were really getting out of control for a little bit at a time. It seemed like, especially in Detroit, so they say. Does that serve a sociological purpose to have a moment, a night where there is more permissiveness towards some unruly behavior?
That reminded me of the Purge movies. It would certainly suggest that
The Purge movies is like the modern example. I also, the first time I had ever heard of Devil's Night, and it's since come up professionally in my research, but for me, it was The Crow. The movie The Crow was the first time I had locked into this notion of Devil's Night, and that was, I guess, still kind of an issue in Detroit in the 90s. But sorry, go on.
Yeah, so I think that what the research that I am pulling from for my ideas around this are the fact that if we want something to serve a purpose for us, and we go into it with that expectation. So, for example, you think of the idea of, I'm going to go blow off some steam because I want to just get rid of all this built up tension and anger and frustration, and I'm mad at my boss and my parents and all of these different authority figures, and you just want to just kind of let it out. If you go into a Devil's Night with that intent, then on the other side of it, people probably will report, and studies have shown this with the blowing off steam, that they do feel that then. They feel like they have exercised their own inner demons and kind of are they feel better. And it's in terms of, I mean, there's a lot of different research looking at group I guess pranking, and then taken to the extent, you could have a lot of destruction, but it does become kind of a also opportunity for people to feel a sense of solidarity. It may be around something that's destructive, but it's still generating that feeling that they're in this together, and that in that moment they have power, especially over, all of the social norms that keep us restricted in our behavior. They may feel like, oh, okay, we're in this together. We have enough numbers now that we can do what we want to do. And for lack of other things to do, they might just burn something or throw some pumpkins around. But in that, they are having a sense of community, however destructive it might be.
Yeah. Is that, Lynn, is that something that you find across cultures, that there is this unified idea of, okay, we need one night where people are allowed to go a little bit crazy?
Yeah, absolutely. And we often get 2 nights a year, so that's probably enough, I imagine, for us. But it's interesting too to think about where the boundaries of that are, because as a folklorist, we love to think of cultural expressions in terms of genre. What form of folklore is this? And a prank is really specific. It's not a crime, right? It implies sort of a playful badness. I got you, but I'm not here to actually harm you or fully destroy property. And we seem to know when that line gets crossed, but leading up to it, it's not always clear. And anytime we have that, we're sort of operating in this realm of the liminal, where things are, betwixt and between. which is just a perfect fit with Halloween, where, as you said, that veil is thin. We're in between, you know, whether that's in between one year and the next, if indeed Samhain was the new year, or whether that's we're just in between the, you know, the season of light and growth and the season of darkness and harvest and reaping. And that liminality opens the door to sort of being right on the edge of a whole lot of other stuff as well. So when we see vandalism in the pranks, they happen at the threshold, the literal limen of people's homes, right? You come to the door, you don't march inside and start smashing their furniture. You stand at the door. And if you're going to, you know, deface someone's property, it's usually something temporary and something done in that liminal space of the front yard or the front porch, like smashing a pumpkin or toilet papering a tree or egging someone's front door. We don't breach that boundary of the home. That's not a prank. That's a crime. So we keep it at this kind of strangely, you know, just off of bad level. And that seems to just lean into the symbolism of what's going on.
It's interesting to me because there is that offshoot of also with the treat and the trick element that part of this was, and you referenced this, the mummers, but also this notion of souling and coming to someone's door and saying, "We'll pray for your lost souls in exchange for the sweet treat." So it's sort of like there's the element of it where it was just this community service. Well, you know, exchange. Give me a treat. I'll say a prayer. But also the kind of the trick element of it as well. They seem like they're kind of existing at the same time, simultaneously.
Yeah, it speaks to a real pragmatism within this acknowledgement of community and the social contract. Is like, I'm not giving my good wishes away for free here, you know, like I'm going to come to your house. You're not going to be alone, but you're going to owe me something for doing it. Or maybe I'm going to take something because I think I'm owed something. So we get, it really is, it's a really symbolically fruitful cultural exchange that goes on.
So we oh, go on, Margee.
Oh, it reminds me of Emil Durkheim. He was a really old sociologist, but he talked about the sacred and profane, and that, you know, the pranking and can be seen as a way to find out where that line is. You know, where is that line that says, okay, now you've crossed outside of what's acceptable? And so it does remind people, like in our society, in this group, that's the line that you can't cross. And by pushing the limits, getting right up to it, it can remind us what we all are agreeing to in this social contract. And sometimes that line does need to be kind of highlighted because, you know, we can forget where it is and maybe, you know, step over it a little too often or start restricting too much. So it is a way of kind of reasserting our social contract.
Yeah. We reach this point where the Puritans come over to North America and they're in New England, and it seems like they're very much divorced of what this nonsense was of what was kind of becoming Halloween. But meanwhile, in the South and in Virginia, there was still some practice of these and then the Irish immigrants come along and they're bringing it hardcore. What are some of can you speak to any kind of urban legends or things or legends and folklore that were kind of emerging in these times with these different pockets of people, and then how that added to the overall fabric of specifically the United States and our practice of this time? Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, my area of expertise is more in contemporary legends about this sort of stuff. But when we look back at the past, one of the things that we're seeing is this religious plurality that was existing here. And Halloween, for many of us today, is a more secular celebration. Very few of us are celebrating Halloween by that name as All Hallows Eve preceding All Saints Day and then All Souls Day. But when we see all of these different religious groups coming together, we start to see sort of, you know, two responses to it. One, which is syncretic religions, where we start getting things being put together, and we get Santeria, we get voodoo, we get these new creations that take on pieces of the old things and bring in the intermingling of cultures from other places. And then we also get a really clear-cut line through them. And there's a famous quote from Voltaire where he basically is talking about the nature of superstition. And he basically describes it as everyone is superstitious of the group standing right next to them. So that, that Protestants would see Catholics as especially superstitious. Catholics would probably see Jewish people as especially superstitious. And we sort of go down the line where when we see sort of different beliefs, we begin to immediately start that work of othering this. So when we have deep religious practice over here and sort of asceticism over here, we immediately make that divide as deep as it can be and say, all right, this is now, verging on black mass. This is approaching evil in the way that this is being done here. So we sort of like to see it as this melting pot where everyone came together and merged their beliefs into one. And in a lot of ways, what it really became was really steep accusations of witchcraft. So we get this idea that the Catholic Eucharist was a sign of witchcraft, of cannibalism, which is an interesting interpretation when you look at it historically. But we begin to develop this sense of what evil looks like, and it looks a lot like other people's religious beliefs.
Right. Do you have something to add to that, Margee?
No, I think Lynne, you covered it all. Yeah.
It's curious to me, and I didn't want to necessarily leap this fast ahead, but in 2022, we are seeing more people having secular spiritual beliefs. Seems like a lot of secular, even kind of paranormal beliefs. We're seeing less organized people, especially younger generations, signing up for organized religion. And we also see this increase in the quote unquote spooky season. And I'm kind of curious if you see a correlation between all of these things happening at once and sort of what that means. Either one of you can start with that. If Margee, if you have some thoughts, fire away.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. And I do remember looking at some data. It was a little bit dated, though, that was showing those trends of increasing belief in ghosts and paranormal while decreased religious beliefs. And so I think that it can be tied to a few different things. I mean, there is the influence of what is in popular media. It is a form of entertainment, as we all know, to get really into ghosts and the paranormal, and to think about things that aren't right in front of us that could be, just even imagining the could be, the fantasy, the questions we have that can't be answered generates a sense of novelty and can be just fun to think about. And so I think that there is the just kind of entertainment in it all. But I think also it is we do want to feel like we are part of something bigger than ourselves. And by believing in the paranormal and ghost, we are then imagining that there is something beyond us. There's something beyond our life after we die. There is something else. And that sense of belonging to something bigger is associated with not being as afraid of death. So in terror management theory research, looking at different people's worldview, if you have a sense that there is something after, it can lower our own fear of dying. And so I think that doesn't go away just because somebody isn't part of a specific religion. We're always going to be afraid of our own death, or at least imagine what comes after. And so it can be a way of managing that fear to focus and hold on to the paranormal.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it does seem like this spooky season. I kind of said it at the top. It's people are kind of embracing this as a year-round thing now, and that kind of interest, and then I guess the spooky season specifically is sort of like Christmas for a certain group of people, where it really begins early. And look, even the spirit Halloween stores seem to pop up earlier every year, and the Hallmark stores are kind of replacing their summer stuff with Halloween stuff very, very early on. So I mean, that's I have to think that that says something about us from a folkloric standpoint as well, right, Lynn?
Yes, I think so. And I think one of the things that we see whenever we look at data of self-reported belief in the paranormal or in ghosts, we always have to consider that what we're getting is not what people believe, but what people are willing to admit that they believe. And that's somewhat of a different thing. It almost goes back to Margee, we get to do follow-up questions now. Yeah, deeper ethnographic data is always better for sort of plumbing the depths of supernatural or paranormal belief, because for a large part of contemporary society, the question, do you believe in ghosts, has a right answer, and that answer is no, because that is the rationalist answer, the scientific answer, the skeptical answer. And for almost everyone, the answer is actually somewhere more along the lines of no, but, and then there's a personal story. And Margee, I love that you separated like entertainment paranormal from like the experience of the paranormal, because in entertainment worlds, the paranormal is expected to be over the top, right? I mean, jump scares and gore and psychological terror and atmospheric horror and all that stuff. And on like the lived experience level, people's experiences with the supernatural verge on the mundane. So someone's story that follows that no, but might take the form of, my grandfather did visit me the night that he died in my bedroom. I didn't know he had died. I found out the next day. But he was standing in my room when I woke up, and he told me everything was going to be okay. And I felt happy, and I fell back asleep. And so someone will tell that story, and it's like, what was that if not the ghost of your grandfather as it is departing this world? But what they're saying no to is that less personal stuff, that bigger stuff. No, of course, I don't believe in all of that irrational whatever. But when it comes to my very specific, hard to explain, deeply coincidental, if not true, experience, yeah, I believe in that. And I think that what the spooky season does is it lets us lean into that without embarrassment, right? It's a whole season about it. Now I get to talk about ghosts. I get to, put little gravestones out in my front yard. And the longer we stretch that out, the longer the doors open for us to talk about the stuff that we love to talk about, but that we're maybe not always supposed to be super leaning into.
I love it because it is this, it feels like a paradigm shift, honestly, where there's more weird kids out there, but the weird isn't all that weird anymore. And from the journalistic perspective, I've said this many, many, many times that I you can go to any bar or any gathering, in the world, and it seems like a lot of people might start with, nah, I don't believe in ghosts. Like when it comes up, and it eventually will always come up in some sort of bar gathering, whatever. Nah, I don't believe in ghosts. But there was this one time. It's like it couches. I recently interviewed a guy who is involved. And people that listen to this show frequently have heard me reference this. It's one of the producers for the CBS show Ghosts, and lovely guy. And he was telling me a story of like, well, I don't really believe in the paranormal stuff. And then he launches into this whole tale that was freaking bizarre and like so compelling. And he was telling it as someone that was like, yeah, and then I found this other thing out, and that was kind of weird. But it was all like from well, but I don't believe in this stuff. I'm like, dude, it sounds like you actually had an experience, and maybe you should allow yourself to believe that a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. And there's a really famous work of scholarship in folklore studies that I love sharing with my students because they're all totally affronted, that posits that both belief and disbelief are traditional stances, because we tend to think of belief as traditional and disbelief as scientific. And that's fairly arbitrary. Most of us are not doing any of the scientific rigor that it would take to prove any of the things that we believe in, either true or false. I don't believe in gravity because I have actually completed the equation of gravitational force of the mass of the planet. I believe in gravity because every time I drop something, it falls to the ground. So it's experience that leads to my belief in that very foundational scientific fact. It is also experience that leads anyone into a belief in the supernatural. Personal lived experience. It's just whether or not that lines up. And the personal experience of our friends and family and communities as narrated to us. So when friends who we know to be intelligent, sober, rational people say, hey, you know, I don't believe in ghosts, and that claim as a frame to a story is a grounding in rationality. It's saying, I'm not a crazy person telling you the story. I'm someone who doesn't believe in ghosts, but check this out. And it actually functions as an authenticating factor for the story. Because if you presented it as, I believe in every weird thing that's ever happened, and let me tell you this, you're suddenly like, oh, well, now I don't believe you. Right. So it's this rhetorical technique that people have that actually makes their stories seem more viable.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love thinking about that because it's something that people do without, it's not like they're plotting and thinking, okay, I need to make sure that I'm coming off as, legitimate. It just happens. We just learn that through socialization, that if we want to be believed, we have to offer a little bit of that grounding. I love that.
Yeah, that's excellent. I hadn't thought about that as well. So I love that. Margee, we had this moment in the 60s. I think it was more like post Great Depression into the 60s where Halloween really became fun. We reached the point of the Charlie Brown special, and it was maybe less about the spooky and more entirely about the fun. Can you still have the benefit? Obviously, you've studied a lot about the benefit of fear, and can we still have the benefit of fear if we're leaning in entirely to the fun of the scares? Do we lose anything?
No, I mean, it all, of course, depends on context. That's what I start everything with, is it depends, why people are there. But ultimately, when people are spending time and resources to do something, they want to experience something that will be positive, even if the route to get to positive is what other people would consider negative. So, engaging with fear, wanting to be scared, it's ultimately still, the fun becomes part of why it can be beneficial, is because you want to gain something from the experience. And what's amazing about our minds and what we can do is, even though we are going in with just, we want to have fun, we know nothing is real, we're not really scared of anything, we can suspend all of that and just let it all go and accept the reality that we're shown, that is a haunted house or a movie. We just accept that we're there, and then just reap all of the rewards of the fun element of it. So I don't think that it decreases the benefits. I mean, I could see, in our research, we do show that people who felt like they challenged their fears and learned about themselves also reported the experience as more scary and more thrilling. So, our data does suggest that there is a relationship between feeling, that it was scary and feeling a sense of learning about yourself, and then ultimately having improved mood. So I think that, that's a good question. That is it would be really good to kind of tease out where the tipping point is, from going from kind of too fun, too safe to the right kind of fun, scary combination.
And also the point of diminishing returns, where if you're entering into, I love going to haunted house attractions, but I have a feeling that and I've done some of the more intense ones as well, and those become less fun for me for many reasons. Or if I watch certain kinds of horror movies, when it starts feeling a little too real or gratuitous or whatever, it's less fun. I feel like I'm not getting the enjoyment part of it so much as, like, I've reached a point where, I don't know, maybe this is just plain scary or uncomfortable or whatever, and I'm not getting the payout, the benefit.
Yeah, we want that absurdity in there. I think that that's really important, is that, it doesn't get into the whole generating feelings of shame or discomfort. It's really the absurdity is what can make the typically horrific, body parts flying everywhere. If it's absurd, then it gives that door to have some fun with it, because it's not real.
Yeah, I really love that, because I've never done work, as I know you have, with, haunted houses and these sort of, crafted attractions that are really meant to tap into the things that are going to freak us out. As a folklorist, one of the things I look at is legend tripping. And legend tripping is like when you all pile into a car when you're, teenagers, and you go to the spooky haunted statue in your hometown cemetery, and you do whatever ritual you're supposed to do there and wait and see if the statue does whatever it's supposed to do, like cries or moves or changes color or whatever. And it's sort of like this DIY fear, right? You can make it as scary as you want or as not scary as you want. You can prank your friends or not. And you can interpret what does happen in sort of whatever way you want. And so there's this crafting of experience that each different group of people who goes to these places gets to do. And folklorists have found that different people like legit do different things when they go there. So that there are some people, a really great example, and I'm sure they exist in a lot of places. We have one here near Salt Lake City. But in San Antonio, there's the ghost tracks, a set of train tracks where the story tells that a group of children on a school bus died when a train hit them. And if you go park your car on the train tracks, you will be pushed up the hill. Your car will actually roll forward up the hill, and it's the children saving you from the fate that they suffered. Then these are sometimes just called Gravity Hill, sites, and they're not tied to a supernatural story at all. But this amazing folklorist named Carl Lindahl went and did fieldwork there and found everything from like totally skeptical groups of teenagers to like almost religious pilgrimage groups where families, especially Hispanic Catholic families, were showing up and almost treating the ghosts of the children as sainted spirits that you could ask for divine intervention or help or healing from by engaging in their story with them. And that whole spectrum of experience, everywhere from sort of, the sublime to the terrifying, is just to know that that's all packed in there is really cool.
I continue to be just so fascinated by the, I guess, regionalism of these legends as well. The different rules that you have to follow. Is it three times or 13 times you need to say Bloody Mary in order to bring her forth, and who is Bloody Mary in your neighborhood or your country, and depending on what era you're saying it in. I love the customization of the legends. I want to talk a little bit about, because it's relevant because of the new movie Halloween Ends. Halloween Ends, obviously, spoiler alert, I don't think we've seen the last of Michael Myers, but Halloween Ends really began in a time, it was the initial movie was released in 1978, and that was a couple years after Watergate. And there's my dog barking, wanting attention. It's the wonders of showbiz from home, I guess. So Watergate takes place in 1974. Halloween is released in 1978. Another kind of very horror in the suburbs movie, When a Stranger Calls, the babysitter, the call is coming from inside the house. That's 1979. And then we also have this emerging satanic panic. So I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are about what the hell was going on with the suburbs, what the hell was going on at that time that radically altered Halloween as a holiday, and also instilled us with such paranoia about the safety of those neighborhoods. Margee, do you want to start with that? It really touches on sort of the social vibe, right?
Yeah. I think it, there was this idea after World War II and the GI Bill, when they really started building the suburbs, these massive developments where a family could buy a home without having to put too much down, and you could get the 30-year mortgage. And it opened up this idea that, wow, you can have this perfect life that was really only for white Christians. The Black population didn't get to take advantage of that GI Bill. And so we're left out of the whole housing growth in the suburbs. But for the marketing, in the campaigns and everything for the new refrigerators and stoves and all of this picture perfect kind of lifestyle was painted. And that's what you saw, the stereotype in the 50s and 60s. And So when we start getting to the late 70s, the cracks are really starting to show in that ideal perfect lifestyle, that never really was the case. That, you can make it look prettier in the suburbs, but that doesn't mean that there aren't real problems behind the doors, and that there's crime, there's dangerous people. Those dangerous people might be the people, who are right next to you instead of outside somewhere. So I think that because the suburbs were built up as this safe haven, and that's what they were supposed to be, when you start seeing that's not true, it really opened the door for a lot of brilliant writers and directors and creative minds to say, hey, let's take this thing, much like we take clowns or young kids, and say, let's take this thing that's supposed to be good and that's supposed to be safe, and let's just twist it around, and let's show what happens when we take that veil off of the perfect idea of the lifestyle and what is suburbia. You also see in the 70s that more women are entering the workforce, and so there is more of a bringing in of the outside world into the home, and with it all of the realities of life that maybe people didn't have to confront before. Now they have to confront them. And so it's, I think, we see it in our horror movies. That's what's so amazing and wonderful about horror movies, is you see this great reflection of what's actually happening in society. So those are my 2 cents.
So that also, is it a total misread for me to say that as the women were leaving the home and entering the workplace, some of these fears that started emerging was also a bit of a shaming of, like, this is what happens when you leave your children behind and you're not home.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I was the latchkey kid, which really was most kids who both parents worked. It was a shameful kind of label to have, even when I was growing up. And so it definitely was a threat to, don't mess this ideal, perfect kind of home life.
Yeah.
But the reality is we have to work.
Yeah, and Lynn, I want you to talk about the kind of the urban legends and how folklore represented this paranoia and end to the perceived safety during this time. I mean, I mentioned there's also, this was right around the time that we start first hearing about you have to screen your candy. There's razor blades in your candy, and then there was the Tylenol scare. The notion of this thing that was just kind of lighthearted and fun, or maybe spiritual and fun, suddenly had a very real world threat to it.
Yeah, and this is really where we see a lot of the sort of symbolic communicative weight of these legends stepping in, because babysitter legends, which you referenced the film When a Stranger Calls, the classic urban legend that's behind that story, and all the other babysitter stories. The one that terrified me when I was young was the tagline was "Humans can lick too." The one where
I remember that.
I know.
I remember that.
Tormented me.
Oh yeah.
I didn't even have a dog, so I don't know what I thought was going to happen.
I just got chills.
But
I remember that.
It's interesting because we see the babysitter legends kind of condemnation of men on fronts, because it's a condemnation of mothers for leaving, and look, you have to outsource the care of your children to incompetent teenage girls, and then a condemnation of the teenage girls for being incompetent. It's like, you can't win. But then teenage girls sort of adopt those legends and tell them among themselves as this way of saying, man, being an adult woman sounds terrifying. Like,
Right.
being responsible for children, being at the mercy of all the people out there who are there to harm us. And that's really, I think, one of the consistencies that we see in these legends is, anytime we want to be, or we want to, not that we ever want to be, but anytime it suits our sociological needs to really dwell in fear, threats to children is just one of the best ways that we can achieve that. And so, Halloween becoming a children's holiday, it was not that when it was, Samhain or All Saints Day or All Souls Day or Dia de Muertos. It was all ages, and Halloween now is very child oriented. And so the threats of Halloween are the threats to children. So we get these legends of razor blades in apples and contaminated Halloween candy that has poison in it, all of these different things almost across the board. None of them have happened. And when they have happened, they're often instances of what folklorists would call ostension, which is basically the story came first and now I'm acting it out, and I'm acting it out in a way to make the story scapegoat my behavior. So the instances of contaminated or tampered with candy that have been found to be true were parents harming their own children. So the people who act in the role of the protector in the legends, getting their kids candy screened at the airport x-ray machines, that's who's actually going to hurt kids, most likely is their own family members. And it's so interesting to see these patterns, this, the idea of the trick element of Halloween and how quickly that can turn nasty and become evil. We see these fears of external threats penetrating our safe, secure places, like the suburbs. It's supposed to be this, this utopia of quiet and safety. And the scary things are supposed to be on the edges. I mean, and that's what we see so often, going back to that idea of liminality. The haunted house is never right in the middle of town. It's on the edge of town, right before town becomes barren wasteland of train tracks and untended fields. And what horror really does well is it takes that danger and puts it right in our safest spaces, in our homes, in the food we eat, in the food that we give to our children, that other people give to our children. That fear of contamination and invasion is just so evident in all of those stories.
Just sticking with this for another moment, the idea of Michael Myers in Halloween, why is he, from both a folklore standpoint and a sociological standpoint, such a terrifying and effective monster, him as the actual character? Margee.
I think because he is both faceless, but we're also seeing a lot of that through his mask. There's a lot of
Point of
spots where,
view.
yeah, and I think that's really interesting because it does, cause us to question what does it take to become this monster, and what has happened to this person. Could this person be any person? So you don't really have a clear idea of who your enemy is or who this monster is, and so it can kind of take on your worst fears from there. And the fact that he can be so invisible, and that's the real fear in the suburbs, are the threats that are right there, but you can't see them. And so, he kind of can be invisible, but be this specter kind of hanging over everyone's head as they, go down the street and take a jog or just walk to their friend's house, that he could be right there and you just can't see him. So I think that's all involved in it. Yeah.
And similarly, like, I guess to zombies or slow moving zombies, it's he's taking his time. He's not.
Yeah.
There's no rush.
Yeah, I think, is Aaron frozen?
I think he is.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
He's probably still talking in his space. What I was going to say was, I think another piece of this is that, as I understand it, Michael Myers could be us, right? I mean, he's from that community.
Is he back?
Technical difficulties. It sounded like he was back for a minute.
It did. But I think, I agree that it is the fact that he could be your neighbor. He could be anyone. And so then if it can be anyone, then no one is truly safe.
Exactly. It almost speaks against like the xenophobic tendency of the terror comes from somewhere else into my space. It starts here. It's a neighbor. It's someone who grew up here coming back home to wreak havoc on things, right? To cause this. And I think the mask is actually a really astute thing to turn to, because we see that same facelessness in like Slender Man. Now it's this anybody sort of idea that it's not just the face of one scary person. It's this could be anybody.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder if we'll get Aaron back.
I don't know. We can just go on,
Yeah.
our own. Do
Yeah.
you have a favorite horror film? Because I am not a horror aficionado. I don't dislike it or anything, but I need recommendations.
Oh gosh, I keep every year it seems to switch, which I think is because every year something else is different is happening in my life that is going to move me in one direction or the other. But right now, and maybe it's just nostalgia, but Cabin in the Woods, which used to be my favorite movie all the time, and then it was Get Out, and then it was The Witch, which was I loved The Witch. It was so quiet and spooky and dark. But now I think I'm looking for a little bit of comedy in my horror again in my life right now. So Cabin in the Woods is just such a fun, campy kind of throwback to some of the 80s B horror movies kind of thing. So yeah, but it does change very frequently. So,
Yeah.
and I need to see, I know that there have been some really good ones that have come out. I want to see Nope. I haven't seen that one yet. So yeah, the list is piling up. I need to watch more, honestly.
Cabin in the Woods is not even one of my all-time favorite scary movies. It is one of my all-time favorite movies,
Movies.
period. Hands down, I love it. Also,
Yeah.
The Witch, just recently, since one of the things that I study is fandoms, I was sort of scrolling mindlessly through some fan art collections, and I found these adorable depictions of Black Phillip, which is
Oh,
strange to say, the terrifying goat embodiment of Satan, but still really adorable drawings of this cute round little goat sitting with pumpkins that I
it
ended
was.
up downloading a bunch of. So, it's sort of I think we almost, when we get to make pop culture our own through
Yeah.
that participatory, culture that is available to us, thank you, communications technologies, we start seeing that what we want to do with scary stuff is sometimes just mediate its scariness and other
Mhm.
times kind of make it
Make it
work
our
for
own.
us,
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that the why Black Phillip just really took off into fandom is really interesting. I mean, I think that movie really would be an interesting case study.
Yeah. Yeah,
But yeah, it was a very good one. Oh, you're back. Maybe.
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 Oh, no. Oh,
Oh, we heard you for a second.
you are being frozen on the best facial expressions is what you need to
That's
know.
true. That's
What
true.
has taken place with my audio? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Now
in and out.
Okay. Well, the due to the internet gods stepping in, I guess if you can hear me,
We can hear you.
and we will probably
Oh, now it's going.
wrap it up right after
That
this.
is a
But
great Frozen.
I'm just curious about the evolution of Halloween and what impacted that.
Oh, we missed the question.
Yep, we missed that question.
Okay, I will try that again. I was saying,
Uh-oh.
what?
Nope.
How do you?
Put it in the chat.
What do you predict as far as
Maybe in the
the
chat.
evolution of Halloween and the spooky season? Technology.
I was just
I will
praising
chat.
technology too, man.
I know.
That's bad. Yeah.
Social media.
The evolution of social media? Is that the question?
I think that sounds like a great question.
Yeah. Fear in social media? The fear
Mm.
of social media is definitely a growing thing.
I think you should just talk about that for a while, Margee.
Well, just in general, now we have this whole audience, but I think the kids today who are growing up with it are learning a whole skill set that, people of my generation and born through I guess up until the 90s, I guess that's when kids kind of started growing up with computers being a daily thing, but they're learning a whole new set of skills that I think hopefully in the long run will promote a growing sense of self-knowledge and confidence that doesn't require a whole bunch of external. I think that's the long view. I think in the short term, it's been the opposite. People really feeling more insecure, but I'm hoping that that gets to a peak and then everybody slowly learns like, oh, okay, we shouldn't be basing the opinion of ourselves off of these strangers on the internet.
Yep. And I think we see a really interesting tie-in kind of back to the idea of pranking as well, where I was just being interviewed recently about the phenomenon of NyQuil chicken on social media, all these TikTokers cooking chicken in NyQuil. And it's funny because it causes this near moral panic, especially among older generations, saying, what are kids these days doing? And what's interesting is what the kids these days are doing actually is ostension. They are pretending largely to cook NyQuil chicken, making videos about it until the FDA has to make an announcement. Way more people hear about NyQuil chicken than had ever heard about it before. We basically have in like high speed the satanic panic of the 80s where people acting out, people going on legend trips to graveyards, playing with the motifs and the symbols of Satanism are now being counted as proof of satanic activity taking place in your hometown, you know?
Right.
Karen,
the young kids are just.
Oh my.
Oh, I think you're back.
So, gonna try it like this, and hopefully there won't be a whole lot of craziness. And I'm gonna wrap this up real quick. But what I was trying to ask was just the evolution of Halloween and spooky season in the wake of social media and TikTok. And I think you kind of spoke to that a little bit, but added to that is we are now seeing more representation of other cultures and other legends and folklore, and they're becoming more mainstream. And I think that is a good thing. But how is that impacting what we kind of find scary during this season? Or is it at all?
I think it's great. I think that the more, I think of it very much like, well, from an imaginative point of view, how many different monsters can we come up with, and how can we create them in ways that will be even more surprising or startling or novel or different. And so the more input we have into that creative process, the better.
Yeah. And I think that when we look at, global cultures to find what can be scary, what's going on here, one of the big risks that we face with access to so much information is that we run the risk of decontextualizing beliefs from their parent cultures, so that we take a cool idea that seems spooky to us and we say, oh, that must be like this, it must work this way, and we sort of pull it out and make it our own, which is great, but is not the same thing as coming to a full understanding of that belief in context. And we can end up potentially demeaning or trivializing someone else's culture when we do that. So there's sort of two sides to it. As a folklorist, I think it's fantastic that people now can go online and say, I think I saw this spooky thing while I was out at night, and be like, whoa, maybe it's this thing from the Philippines that I never heard of before, which is awesome. But we also want to make sure that that home culture is the one explaining that belief and that phenomenon to us, if we're going to go out and sort of make something of it. And that really is just, I think, about, like ethical cross-cultural interaction. When I want to learn more about stuff, I go online, I Google it, I read blogs, I read what other people's experiences are. And the closer I can get sort of culturally to the source of that stuff, the better, pop ethnography I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Everything I said, I would say that is the first place to start, is making sure that, it's not misappropriating something, and that it's done with consideration and involvement of wherever something is coming from. Definitely.
Is there any I realize that it takes a while for legends and social science to really gel, but is there anything that you're noticing in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is ongoing, but how that's impacting what scares us, and then more relative to Halloween, obviously a season where people go to strangers' homes and interact, noticing any kind of change or evolution in how we think of what scares us and how. Margee?
I have this question too, and I'm including it in survey collection this year to find out how it's changing. I have a I have a question of if it has kind of diminished our desire for the real intensity. I think that from just anecdotal observations and conversations, people are looking for a little bit more of the softer scares. I could be totally wrong. That's just my initial kind of observations and in discussions. But I think that the whole fear of other people, has been so real now for so long that we're going to see a lot of changes. And so I don't have any answers. I just have a lot of questions too.
Yeah, I can see something similar happening. I think that a lot of our scary stuff for a long time has tied in with the idea of contagion, and whether that's touching a cursed object is what gets you being followed by a spirit or a presence, or whether that's the literal contagion of being bitten by a zombie or a vampire, or whether it's something in film like from It Follows, where it's literally like a supernatural haunt is a sexually transmitted disease.
That was a really good one too. Yeah.
Yeah, this sort of like the epidemiology of the supernatural is something that mirrors our understanding of how things, invisible things that drastically affect our well-beings, if not our mortality, come to us. This is a model we use all the time. And it's one that we've all had cause to experience in a way, way more significant, type of experience. That was a terrible sentence. One thing that I did hear recently, the annual meeting of the American Folklore Society was last week, and someone was telling me that apparently the number of haunted house reports has gone way up after people spent so much time in their homes that they finally had the chance to notice that it was haunted, which I love. I love thinking of all these people with haunted houses spending 90% of their time out of the house, at work, doing something else, finally being at home only to discover, whoa, I've got a ghost here. I think that maybe is going to be a good side benefit for the supernatural.
It's definitely already impacted horror and influenced a lot of the horror that we see coming.
Yeah.
Now been 2 years where the creatives have been writing enough things and been able to direct these films that you're feeling this or noticing this in the genre. I have kept both of you way longer than I expected. I very much appreciate you hanging in there, dealing with some technical glitches. I want to leave you with you promoting your work, but additionally, any final thoughts that I wasn't able to get to that you just have about this time of year, Lynn?
Yeah, I think my final thoughts really are lean into it. Take this opportunity to appreciate all of the spooky stuff. I think that it's one of those arenas of life, as so much folklore is, that gets trivialized easily, and it doesn't need to be. And so that process we all go through, that sort of social negotiation of, I'm going to prove my rationality to you before I say that, this spooky thing, this is the time of year we don't even need to do it. We just get to talk about the spooky stuff. So I feel like that is a good thing. I did just want to share with any folks who care, 2 books, Legend Tripping. This is my haunted statue depicted here, the weeping woman in these. We have a cemetery campus, a cemetery on campus here at Utah State University. And this is our haunted statue. And this book is a collection of some of the big hitters of legend tripping scholarship since the term was coined in the 1960s, I believe. And then also, the internet moves at the speed of something faster than light. And so it's already outdated, but this other book, Slender Man is Coming, is a bunch of folklorists' different thoughts on what this phenomenon was, kind of in the, the mid 2000s or the mid 2010s when it really kicked into gear, and tying it into a lot of other folkloric stuff. Most of the stuff we encounter has precedence. Moral panics have happened before. Ghost stories, urban legends happened before, and seeing the ways that they've happened before and the ways that that informs what's happening now. Well, obviously I think it's cool. I'm a folklorist, but it's also really cool even if you're not a folklorist. So something worth considering.
And the internet normally moves faster than the speed of light. Not so much now.
Not when Aaron is live streaming.
Not the overpriced internet that I'm paying for. And also at some point I need to make it to one of these folklorist meetings. I hear you guys just really throw down that it's a fun gathering. Yeah, you guys,
that's true.
That is true. Yes. Okay. I can't wait to check that out.
I didn't sleep a lot,
It's a party I need to make it to, and send me those books, Lynn.
Can do.
And Margee.
Yeah, I agree. Get out there this year and do something that scares you, that is just enough scare to make you feel like you're alive and like you're still learning about yourself and still surprising yourself. So if you don't like haunted houses, it doesn't have to be that. It can be anything that just gets you to a safety boundary and then push a little bit further. In terms of books, definitely there's my book, Scream, Chilling Adventures of the Science of Fear. I also have a chapter, I put this far too far away for me to grab here, a chapter in this book, which is called Children, Young People, and Dark Tourism. So it's more on the academic kind of side, but it's all about how kids engage with scary material and what they get out of it, why they go, and how they engage with some really heavy stuff. So check that out.
I am literally buying it now. That is so awesome.
Very good. And for anyone that has been watching live, I apologize for the technical glitches, but I know you were in good hands with two excellent guests and academics and people that I immensely respect, and I'm deeply appreciative for their time today. So, and Lynn, Margee, anytime that you guys want to have a chat about anything, about any topical, anything, just, you let me know.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Always great to talk to you, Lynn. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, we should talk more.
Always a good time. We really should.
Yeah. We need to get you guys together in a live space where there's less of a buffering issue on my end. But so Dr. Lynne S. McNeill, Dr. Margee Kerr, thank you for joining me on Talking Strange. And for everyone out there, until next time, be kind, stay spooky, and keep it weird.